You like to think you'd never hurt someone, just because someone told you to. But in one famous experiment, most people did exactly that. And the disturbing part? They weren't criminals. They were ordinary people. So what did they know that you don't? In the 1960s, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram ran a simple test. Or at least, it looked simple. Participants were told they were helping with a study on learning. Their role? Ask questions to another person in another room. And every time that person got an answer wrong, they had to deliver an electric shock. Not a small one, the shocks increased with every mistake. 15 volts, 30 volts, 100, 200, all the way up to 450 volts. Marked as danger, severe shock. Here's the twist. The person receiving the shocks wasn't actually being hurt. It was an actor. But the participants didn't know that. What they heard instead were screams, complaints, begging, eventually, silence. At that point, most people say they would stop, right? They didn't. About 65% of participants continued all the way to the maximum voltage, even when they believed they were seriously harming someone, even when they were visibly uncomfortable, even when they said they didn't want to continue. So why didn't they stop? Because there was someone else in the room, a man in a lab coat, calm, confident, an authority figure. And every time the participant hesitated, he would say things like, "The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you go on." That's it. No threats, no force, just authority. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. If you were in that room, what would you do? You probably imagine yourself refusing, standing up, walking out, but statistically, you'd likely continue. Not because you're cruel, because your brain is wired in a way you don't fully realize. There's something called agentic state. It's when you stop seeing yourself as responsible and start seeing yourself as just following orders. Responsibility shifts. You're not the one causing harm. You're just the one executing instructions. The authority becomes the one in charge of the outcome. Think about it. Have you ever done something you didn't fully agree with just because a boss, teacher, or system expected it? Answered an email you didn't want to? Followed a rule that didn't make sense? Scaled up, it's the same mechanism, just with higher stakes. And here's the part most people miss. The participants didn't suddenly become obedient. They were guided into it, step by step. 15 volts feels harmless. 30 volts, still okay. By the time they reached dangerous levels, they were already committed. This is called the foot in the door effect. Small actions lead to bigger ones. Not all at once, gradually. So the real question isn't, would you obey authority? It's, how far would you go before you notice? Because the environment matters more than personality. When Milgram ran variations of the experiment, obedience dropped dramatically when the authority figure wasn't physically present, or when other people refused to continue. In some cases, obedience dropped below 10%, which means something important. You're not just influenced by authority, you're influenced by context, by who's around you, by how instructions are framed, by how responsibility is distributed. And that leads to a dangerous illusion. We like to believe we're independent thinkers, but under the right conditions, we outsource our judgment, quietly, without noticing. This isn't just about a lab experiment. It explains real-world behavior, why people follow harmful orders in organizations, why systems can normalize unethical actions, why just doing my job becomes a justification. History is full of this pattern, and it doesn't start with bad people. It starts with ordinary people in structured environments. So how do you resist it? Because awareness alone isn't enough. Knowing about the experiment doesn't automatically protect you. In fact, many people who learned about it still believed they would behave differently, and they were wrong. Resistance comes from friction, questioning instructions out loud, slowing down decisions, looking for independent perspectives. Even something as simple as asking, who is actually responsible for this? That question alone can break the agentic state. And here's the most powerful factor, seeing someone else refuse. When one participant in the room disobeyed, others were far more likely to stop. Disobedience is contagious too. So let's go back to the beginning. Why did people obey authority, even when it felt wrong? Not because they lacked morals, but because the situation was designed to override those morals. step by step, instruction by instruction, voice by voice. And now, the uncomfortable truth. That same structure exists everywhere. In companies, in schools, in systems you interact with every day. The difference is, you don't see the lab coat. So next time you feel that quiet hesitation, that moment where something feels off, pay attention, because that's the exact moment most people ignore. And that's where obedience begins, and where it can end if you choose differently.